Hello care leaders. My guest today is Nadra Ahmed, and today's topic is why care providers are marching in Westminster on the 25th of February. For those of you who don't know Nadra, she's been involved in social care for over 40 years. She's the chairman of the National Care Association and has been since 2001. Until 2005, Nadra was the registered manager for 2 private care homes, and she served on numerous government task forces and continues to do so. Interesting things that you can expect to learn from this episode include how successive governments have undervalued the care sector and left us in a precarious position, the key message that Providers Unite hopes to send to the Treasury on the 25th of February, and how the march intends to address systematic issues for the care sector like chronic underfunding. My name's Simon Parker, and this is the Care Leaders Network podcast. So without further ado, please welcome Nadra Ahmed. Nadra, social care puts 38.2 billion into the economy, yet there is a £10 billion funding gap as of April 2025. How do we reach this critical point?
It's about being undervalued and so underinvested in. So the only investment that's gone into the sector has been from providers themselves. They're the ones that are creating the sector that's fit for the future and making sure that we have the capacity to meet the demographics as we go forward, which has enabled successive governments to keep dodging the issues as to why they are underfunding it. And one of the things we must remember from the very outset is that we are looking after people who are ever more complex in their care needs. We've gone from being social care as people would understand it, which is almost like a cream tea society, to running mini hospitals. Now, the funding has just not followed. So we've gone from people who were able-bodied, with not very complex conditions, but maybe when I started in 1981, there were people who would walk into my home, drive into my home, didn't want to live alone anymore, and wanted to be looked after in a way that didn't incur massive bills, etc. What we've now got is people that are coming out of hospital with healthcare needs, very complex conditions, but the funding isn't following.
It's interesting you highlight the point of the journey that the care sector's been on, particularly you mentioned the point around older people. I remember a care home I remember looking at, this is a few years ago now, but exactly the same. There was a car park at the front, and that was where the residents had their cars, and there was a car park at the back where the families and the team had their car, and it's convenient so that they could go and drive to the pub or to the shops or any of that type of stuff. And it was very much more a lifestyle choice. The world that we live in now, I don't know specifically the latest data, but where, again, referencing care homes, if you've got people that are living in a care home, the likelihood is that they're almost definitely going to be in their last couple of years of life, which is a really important part of their life because it's all of their lasts, and the care sector as a whole wants to make as many of those lasts as special as possible, but it's almost impossible to do that whilst it's buckling under the weight of the funding gap. I think the care providers are so hell-bent on trying to do a good job and trying to drive efficiencies in their business and all of that type of stuff. It's almost perpetuated this kind of idea of they're a victim of their own success to a certain extent, because it's almost, because they're so focused and they're so diligent and they're so careful in the way that they're operating, it's almost given the government more space to be able to just pass it off again as successive governments have, which just, for us, of course, it's gut-wrenching because everyone knows that there's a massive funding gap. I don't think the government can even deny that there's a massive funding gap, but they're not doing anything about it, which just, we all kind of sit back and go, So, it's not everyone's aware of it. Everyone knows what needs to happen, but nobody seems to want to take the bull by the horns and make it happen. So, I mean, you've obviously been leading the National Care Association through. There's been a lot of stuff going on, particularly recently. Talk to me about why you feel that now is a watershed moment that requires this kind of unprecedented collective action.
Well, I think providers have been very resilient, and we've fought our corner, but we do tend to work in silos almost. Very often providers are kind of just getting on with the job and trying to deliver the best care they can. They're quite competitive with each other in local areas. They're working with local authorities who have a dominant position in the way that they commission care. And that commissioning process has always been a huge challenge. And, you know, people will recognise, those who are listening will recognise that you're going to have a negotiation with a local authority about your funding, and you end up listening to them telling you about how bad it is for them and how they've not been funded. But that's not our problem. The challenge we face is that we have been underfunded, and I think on many occasions local authorities have taken advantage of their dominant position and actually not given increases in line with the cost of living that we've got. So the providers are subsidising the state, both locally and nationally, to make sure that the services are run. We've raised the quality of the services. We've done everything we possibly can as we've gone forward. And we know that you know, when we had COVID, the crisis really hit hard because we had workforce challenges, and that exacerbated them. We've consistently been downgraded. It's always been about saving the NHS, which we absolutely get. They're our colleagues, and it's a service that any one of us could need at any time, and it's really important that we look after our NHS. But in order to do so, we also need to look at the social care sector in its own right and how much that does, which is about making sure that over 1 million people are looked after on a day-to-day basis. We employ people more than the NHS. We don't want to be competitors with the NHS. It's a different service. We're a different service. People go to the NHS for acute healthcare needs. People come into social care to help them to live independent lives as long as we possibly can. So that piece of it is a real challenge. I think when we got to the stage over the last couple of years where quite rightly the national living wage has been going up and up and up, but actually it's not being funded to do so. These are kind of real challenges. You get into a situation where you then start to look at your the way that you run your service, and the viability becomes an issue. Recruitment has been a real challenge for us because we cannot match the pay that other sectors are able to recruit at. So we get to a stage where we know that there is already a challenge. We keep being told that there's no more money, but we can see money being put into the NHS on a regular basis for services which we're then told have to be diverted. Healthcare tasks need to be diverted into social care in order to leave NHS to do what it's doing. But they're healthcare tasks. Again, they're not funded. I think what happened this time was that we were anticipating the national living wage going up. And I think providers were beginning to realise that this may not be fully funded. But to hit with the employers' national insurance contribution at the same time in a sector that is as fragile as we are, it didn't take very long for people to start to look at the bottom line and realise that it needed 80, 90, 100, 250,000 pounds in the year to meet that responsibility, because that lowering of the threshold. So it is a watershed moment, Simon. It is a moment where I think a lot of the SME providers that we support started to come back to us and say, this is not, I may not be around if this is what continues. Home care providers who have a really challenging commissioning status with their local authorities. So the drive is to keep people at home, but actually the commissioning of it is really quite difficult. It was at that point that we realised that we really needed to do something better than just write the letter. But that is what we did. We wrote the letter, and within hours we were getting people saying they wanted to co-sign that letter. And I think it was almost by accident that this, Providers Unite grew, and we could see it happening before our very eyes and realise that actually it wasn't just us that was beginning to think this is not, we've got to challenge this. It was real people who are running those services and have been for years and been putting up with the underinvestment, suddenly saying, we can't do this anymore. And that's how I think we've got to where we are. This is a real moment. And post-April, depending on what local authorities come up with the funding structures, depending on what government's response is, we will see people really beginning to either struggle or exit the market.
I guess this is everyone's concern, but almost like how many businesses have to go out of business for this to be taken seriously? Because the concern that I think that all of us have is, well, if everything was tight before and we've got all these increases coming down the track, and obviously it's not just the first order consequence of what that means to the business itself. It's the second order and third order consequence of the whole supply chain. So everything that they buy, everything's going to have to go up in line with that as well, which is going to add even more pressure to the set of circumstances. If you're predominantly local authority funded, or maybe you're if you're not kind of maybe high acuity type care often commands a better fee. If you're, I say, just delivering kind of standard care, and the local authorities paying, I don't know, £650 for somebody to live in a care home, and they've actually got high level dementia, or whatever the set of circumstances is. If that's most of your residents, or most of your clients, as it relates to the home care world or specialist or whatever the provision might be, there's no wiggle room. And I mean, I was chatting to a CEO the other day. We sat down and we were having a coffee, and they've got 80% privately funded residents. They're on a good fee for the area, but because of all the additional costs that have come over the last couple of years, they put their fees up in double figures. I think it was maybe 13 or 15%. I can't remember the number already. And that was before all of these extra fees, extra costs were coming down the track. They're now in a set of circumstances where they're going to have to swallow the margin erosion, because there's only so high you can charge fees in that area. They're all already stretched in that respect. So you've got people that literally don't have any choice and literally have no wiggle room. And how you tackle that set of circumstances without cutting necessary costs and unfortunately putting quality up for compromise, or not being able to look after team members, or whatever the set of circumstances is, it's just a horrendous set of circumstances to be for any care provider. And then even for the people that maybe they have got a bit of extra headroom, it's not going to last forever. And people who have got businesses who are trying really hard, but they're creaking already, it feels like a very stark set of circumstances, doesn't it? And I think that's been the kind of predominant driver. So was that, how did it all evolve, if you like? Because the Providers Unite, as we record this is going out as soon as possible to rally the troops, as it were, to get as many people to come out on the 25th of February to march in Westminster to make our point. Talk about the journey that you've been on around how has it evolved. So I guess we've got a really clear understanding of what's happened sector wide to make people feel concerned. How has that then evolved into Providers Unite as we see it today?
Well, I think, when the letter was being signed, it was being signed by a lot of people. And what we realised was that we needed to be very clear that this was not just about NCA. This was about the wider sector, which is why we created that sort of Providers Unite arm of it. So people didn't feel that they couldn't join because they didn't want to join NCA for whatever reason. They wanted to work on the issue. And the issue here is the funding to enable us to carry on to deliver the services that we want. And it didn't matter. We've got, out of the 3,500 people who've now signed this letter, there was a petition going alongside it as well. There's been lots of other things. I think all we did was we brought like-minded people in together and said, what can we do? We have Victoria Beyer, who is our policy lead. And I kind of said to her at the time that this is actually snowballing. We need to do something that enables people to feel not threatened by anything, but to be able to speak their own words and let us know. So we just set up a call. We set up a call with everybody who'd signed the letter and said, what do you want to do? And we have to be realistic about this because there's been all sorts of rumours that Providers Unite is telling people to hand back contracts. We're doing all sorts of things, and I've been challenged about it, not only by journalists, but also by people in the Department of Health. That is what we're doing. We're actually not. What we're doing is we're going into Westminster in order to make sure that people understand that the sustainability of social care depends on us being able to continue to deliver the services. And there is a huge issue already unfolding within our NHS colleagues, which impact individuals, people on a day-to-day basis who can't come out of a hospital because we're told there isn't capacity. And I can come back to that. But when we realised the strength of feeling in the first call, which had, I think, just over 100 people on it, and they were really saying, well, we've got to do something. We've got to do. All we've done is we've facilitated what people want to do. Mm. We were very clear. This has to be done quite strategically. We need to be clear about the ask. We need to be very. We need to be dignified in the way that we do this. This is not about threatening anybody with anything. This is about raising an issue. And it's the first time, it's unprecedented that the sector has come together. And it's across the sector. This is not only about older people. This is about people with learning disabilities, people, mental health, sheltered housing. This is about everybody and the impact it will have on everybody. And so I think that the commonality, what's really interesting is we're talked about as a very disunited sector. There is huge unity within the sector, and something like the CPA, the Care Provider Alliance, brings together 10 of the national bodies. They all signed the letter as well in their own right and as a CPA. And what it shows is the commonality is much greater than the difference. And this rhetoric about disunity within the sector is just a tool that's used by a lot of people to, in some ways, discredit us as a sector. We are all united. We're united in our promise to look after people in the best possible way that we can. We deliver to a set of legislative standards. We are governed by a regulator who is not fit for purpose, but continues to exist. But for some reason, one incident in social care is blown out of all proportion into how dreadful the sector is, when the vast majority of people are delivering really good care in a really sustainable way and working hard. We have a highly skilled workforce who, again, is not recognised or valued in the way that it should be. We have had empty promises that are being made, and they have been for the last 25 years. You know, Tony Blair was one of the very first prime ministers who talked about social care and how it needed fixing. Years later, we've had successive governments telling us they're going to fix it. And then actually, they don't do anything. They bring about a proposal for a commission. They then talk about that commission for a few years, and then they go out of government, and then the next one comes in. And I think the sector is just at the point where it was ready to unite. It just needed belief in itself, and it needed somebody who would bring it together. And I think between Victoria Catt and myself, we've done a kind of a bit of a marketing role, if you like, in order to give people the confidence that we can do this. And that is why we're going to do it. But we're doing it together. We've got people from all local associations, we've got people from the national bodies, we've got people coming across, we've got support from people in the NHS, we've got support from local authorities. So people are understanding that this is an opportunity. And if not now, then when are we going to be able to do this?
Care Leaders Network. I think there's an idea that that we've been involved in lobbying in some way, shape, or form, and that's never been the case. I've always kind of steered us in the direction of not doing that because there are other organisations that have done that. But when I've spoken to people who are involved in lobbying, there's always been this excuse of the fact that, oh well, you're not unified. There isn't somebody that we can speak to about all this type of stuff. You don't have that kind of cohesion. And to your point, I think it's nonsense. I think it's a tool that's been used to create almost like ambiguity and excuses around the set of circumstances. Your point around the fact that how people can seem to miss the fact that the whole point of the care sector is to look after vulnerable people. So we have a very, very clear point of unification. And yes, there might be different people that organise different representative bodies, but it's not like they're not all singing from the same hymn sheet. They might need a little bit of nuance and difference, but it's appreciation and understanding around what social care is and how it supports vulnerable people in society. It's appropriate funding to make sure that the organisations deliver care are sustainable and can reinvest in the long term, and try and for their employees try and offer the best possible packages and culture and environment for them to be able to work with. It's having a regulator that isn't frankly an absolute disaster, because the CQC, I mean, it sounds like they're trying to make some positive changes, which is good, but like, how long is that going to take, and to what negative impact to care providers that are waiting to get registered, or they haven't had a CQC inspection for 5-6 years, or maybe they even sat on a bad inspection and all of those issues have been sorted, and they're potentially losing more money than they would do otherwise, because there's a cost implication from having a CQC inspection that isn't great. You know, lots of people buy businesses and do the turnaround, and then they've got to wait however many years to be able to get that business to a point where it's firing on all cylinders and things, even if they have done everything that they can do from a care quality perspective. And I don't think the handful of people that are involved in representing their kind of individual niche within social care, they say the same thing. So that within of itself, of course, is I guess an area of frustration and just a bugbear for everyone in the social care world, because it's just objectively not true that there isn't unification and a very clear message. To your point, it just feels like an excuse.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all, you know, the thing is we all have different styles. You know, if you look at the people who are recognised as representing social care in the various sectors, we've all got slightly different styles in the way that we do it. You know, that there are some that are very data led. There are some that have got, you know, kind of, you know, some very strong arguments which are based in lots of research. So everybody has a different style. Everybody does things slightly differently, but the baseline message is completely consistent. So whether it's Martin, whether it's Vic, whether it's Jane, whoever it is, whether it's Kathy from the mental health or Ridian, anybody who's working in this field and makes up the Care Provider Alliance, for example, we are all saying pretty much the same thing. We've got the local associations all fighting at a local level for exactly the same thing. And the underlying aim is to support people in that county, in this country, who need care and support when they need care and support. We shouldn't have over 500,000 people waiting for a social care assessment. We shouldn't have 4.5 million people looking after their loved ones as unpaid carers. We should be talking about all of this in the framework of what social care does and what social care delivers. And for every person who says they've had a really bad experience in social care, there are 10, 20, 30 people saying how grateful they are for the care that's been delivered. And we want to eradicate, of course we want to eradicate poor care, but that's why we have a regulator. And that's the role of the regulator. It's also the role of a local authority who's commissioning to know that. Responsible providers are doing their very, very best. And to use this tool of misinformation on a consistent basis to say that we don't know what, we're all we're not unified in our approach. We're not going to play the game. We need to come to the table as equal partners. Whichever one of us goes to the table anywhere will be saying exactly the same thing. We happen to represent the small to medium-sized providers. That's what National Care Association does. That's how it was set up in the 1980s. And it has stayed true to its cause from the outset. We look after people who are small to medium-sized providers. They need that. They need that care and support right now. So we, as an association, the board of directors of National Care Association made that decision that we would support whatever we needed to do within social care to bring this into the highlight. We're all looking forward to a good day, just to remind people that every one person that's there will be representing hundreds of people, because we can't strike like the miners because somebody is back home looking after somebody and in that service. So we can't all be there, but we will be representing the thousands of people who will be working on that day to support the people that we care for.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important thing to highlight as well. The fact that one of the things that I'm looking forward to from the day is the camaraderie of it all. Seeing old friends, talking about it, being able to talk about the amazing things that are happening in the care sector. Of course, the pressures as well. Obviously, we're there to make a stand. We're there to make a point. We're there to have our voices heard and recognised. And obviously, that's super, super important. But yeah, the idea of being amongst good people with the same message, I think is a super, super important one. So yeah, the whole CLN team are going to be on hand to get involved. We've got a banner, we've got some merch. We're ready to rock and roll, and we're looking forward to it. So yeah, we will be there. There's an awful lot of CLN members that are going to be involved as well. So it's great to have that sense of almost like care sector sovereignty, that we're taking the set of circumstances into our own hands, which is a beautiful thing. So talk to me about, so if people are watching this, we're going to try and get this episode out as quickly as possible. Obviously, both of our diaries were a bit hectic in the build up to this, so it's maybe going out a little bit later than we'd ideally have, but we're going to get this out as soon as possible. What's the message for people who are thinking about getting involved, and then also how do they get involved?
Okay, so if you're thinking about getting involved, don't think anymore. and come and join us. Come and join us in London. It's really, really important. This afternoon at 4:30, which is Tuesday, the 18th, at 4:30, we are going to have a meeting of anyone who has signed the note to the Treasury. And we will be talking about how we do this. We have a route planned. We're asking you to bring a picnic, to keep this a very, very light event where we want people to see us as a sector that is there standing up for other people, for the people that are not able to be there. But we also want people to understand that we're not here demonstrating in a way that's going to cause any challenge to anybody. We've had amazing conversations with the police, with everybody in Westminster. So come on down. The gathering we think will probably be, but if obviously the final details are still being sorted out. Will be in St James's. We will be around the Treasury to start with. We will walk through. And we'll go around Parliament Square and end up in the square itself, where we've got some people who are service users as well, and they will have the opportunity to be in there, but only 300 at a time. And then from there, what we want is for people to go into Westminster to meet with their MPs. And there is a way that you can do that on the day by using a green card, signing up. And if your MP's in the building, they will come out and they will come and see you. My vision is that, Westminster Hall will be full of providers meeting their MPs, telling them what the challenges are, the real stories from real people about the impact of what's happening, and why this matters for our country. This, we're not just here to support the NHS. We are here to support the people who need care and support. That is our primary reason for being a sector that should be recognised in its own right. So if you work in the sector and you have the option, please come and join us and meet people like Simon, people everywhere who will be there, very, very like-minded. And let's just show our unity. Let's show our strength. And let's show the fact that we have been resilient up to now. We want to carry on to deliver, but we need that support. And that is investment in social care. That is what we need. And that is what we will be calling for.
Amazing. I think it's essential. I think it's timely, and I think it's a beautiful thing to do as well, Nadra. So thank you for getting the wheels in motion with this. I know a lot of different people are involved now. Obviously, there's thousands, literally thousands of people that are signed up and registered to come and make some impact. So it's going to be a good day. Again, a week from now, our podcast will have gone out after the call that you mentioned, but we'll share it with members later, just to make sure everyone knows that that's the case. And I look forward to seeing you and the crowds of people from the care sector to go and have a real impact on Tuesday, Nadra. So thank you to you and the team for making it happen. And let's go and get after it on Tuesday and go make a big impact.
Looking forward to it, Simon. See you there.
There we go.